The dust-caked woman's body hit the wooden gate with a hollow thud that echoed across the empty yard, her fingers clutching at the weathered planks before sliding down as consciousness abandoned her completely. Colt Nolan dropped the saddle he had been oiling and sprinted toward the gate, his boots kicking up small clouds of Nevada dust in the afternoon heat. The woman lay crumpled against the fence like a discarded puppet, her dress torn and stained with days of hard travel, her dark hair matted with sweat and grime. He knelt beside her, pressing 2 fingers against her neck to find a pulse. It fluttered weakly beneath his touch, rapid and thready. "Jesus," he muttered, sliding his arms beneath her slight frame. She weighed almost nothing, her body frighteningly light as he lifted her against his chest. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and he could feel the fever radiating from her skin even through the layers of filthy fabric. Whatever had driven her to his remote ranch outside Sloan, Nevada in this merciless summer of 1882, it had nearly killed her. Colt kicked open the door to his modest ranch house and carried her inside, grateful for the relative coolness of the thick adobe walls. His home was sparse but clean, the result of 10 years of solitary living on this patch of land he had claimed after his discharge from the army. He laid her on his bed, the only real bed in the house, and stepped back to assess the situation. She was young, perhaps 22 or 23, though it was hard to tell beneath the layers of dirt and exhaustion. Her clothes, despite their current state, had once been fine quality, the kind of dress a respectable woman from a town would wear. But the hem was shredded, her boots worn through at the soles, and her hands were blistered and bleeding from what looked like days of walking across rough terrain. He fetched water from the pump outside and a clean cloth, then began the careful work of cleaning her face. The dirt came away in streaks, revealing pale skin beneath, burned red across her cheekbones and nose from sun exposure. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her eyes sunken from dehydration. Whatever her story was, she had been through hell to get here. Colt worked methodically, cleaning what he could without impropriety, removing only her ruined boots and the torn outer layer of her dress to reveal a stained cotton shift beneath. He covered her with a light sheet and went to prepare a broth, something she could take if she woke. But as the hours passed and darkness fell over the desert, she did not stir. Her breathing remained shallow but steady, her pulse weak but persistent. He pulled a chair beside the bed and kept watch through the night, changing the cool cloth on her forehead every hour, dripping water between her cracked lips when he could. By morning, she still had not woken. The second day passed much like the first. Colt managed to get small amounts of water down her throat, enough to keep her alive, but she remained locked in whatever deep sleep her body demanded. He tended to his animals with one ear always listening for sounds from the house, checking on her every hour. The fever broke on the second afternoon, leaving her drenched in sweat. But still, she did not wake. On the third morning, Colt was frying eggs at the stove when he heard a sound from the bedroom. He abandoned the pan and rushed to the doorway to find her eyes open, staring up at the rough-hewn ceiling beams with an expression of complete confusion. "Easy now," he said softly, approaching slowly as if she were a spooked horse. "You are safe. You collapsed at my gate 3 days ago." Her eyes found him, and he saw they were a remarkable shade of green, bright even in her weakened state. She tried to speak, but only a rasping croak emerged from her damaged throat. "Do not try to talk yet," he said, reaching for the cup of water he had kept beside the bed. "Let me help you sit up a little. You need to drink." She was too weak to resist as he slid an arm behind her shoulders and lifted her just enough to bring the cup to her lips. She drank desperately, and he had to pull it away before she made herself sick. "Slowly," he cautioned. You have been out for 3 days. Your body needs time." She nodded weakly and sank back against the pillows, her eyes never leaving his face. He could see her trying to assess him, trying to understand where she was and whether she was truly safe. He did not take offense at her wariness. A woman alone in the West learned quickly not to trust. "My name is Colt Nolan," he said, settling back into the chair beside the bed. "This is my ranch about 5 miles outside of Sloan. You walked here, though from where I cannot say. Do you remember anything?" She opened her mouth again, and this time sound emerged barely more than a whisper. "Kelsey. My name is Kelsey Dawson. Miss Dawson," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "Can you tell me where you came from? Are you hurt anywhere beyond exhaustion and exposure?" She closed her eyes, and for a moment he thought she had drifted off again. But then she spoke, her voice gaining a fraction more strength. "I walked from Henderson. Maybe further, I lost track of the days." Henderson was nearly 30 miles away across some of the most unforgiving desert terrain in Nevada. The fact that she had survived the journey at all was remarkable. "That is a hard walk, even for a man prepared for it," Colt said carefully. "What drove you to make it?" Her eyes opened again, and he saw something flash in them, fear perhaps, or anger. "I had to leave. I could not stay." He did not press. Whatever she was running from, she would tell him when she was ready or not at all. It was not his business, though the protective instinct that flared in his chest surprised him with its intensity. "Well, you are safe here," he said finally. "You can stay as long as you need to recover. No one will hurt you under my roof." Something in her expression softened, and he saw tears gather in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I did not think I would make it. I saw your gate, and it was the last thing I remember." "You made it," he assured her. "Now you need to focus on getting your strength back. Are you hungry?" "I was making eggs." She nodded, and he rose to fetch her a plate, relieved to have something practical to do. The eggs had burned slightly in his absence, but he scrambled them onto a plate anyway along with some bread and brought it back to her. She struggled to sit up, her arms shaking with the effort, and he helped her prop herself against the pillows. She ate slowly, taking small bites as if afraid the food might disappear, and he saw the hollow hunger in her eyes that spoke of more than just 3 days without eating. When she had finished half the plate, she pushed it away weakly and sank back, exhausted by even that small effort. "Rest now," Colt said, taking the plate. "Your body needs time to heal." "Where will you sleep?" she asked, glancing around the small house. "I have bedding," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the main room. "I will be comfortable enough on the floor. You need the bed." "I cannot take your bed," she protested weakly. "You already have," he pointed out with a small smile, "and you will keep it until you are well." "I will not hear arguments on this, Miss Dawson." She was too tired to argue further, and within minutes, she had drifted back to sleep, this time the natural sleep of healing rather than the frightening unconsciousness of the previous days. Over the following week, Kelsey slowly regained her strength. Colt found himself structuring his days around her care, bringing her meals, helping her to stand and walk a few steps when she was strong enough, sitting with her in the evenings as the desert cooled and talking about neutral things, the weather, the ranch, his horses. She said little about herself, and he did not push, content to let her reveal what she would in her own time. On the 8th day after her collapse, she managed to walk outside to the porch on her own, though she had to rest after only a few minutes in the chair he quickly provided. The Nevada sun was brutal even in the early morning, but she turned her face toward it with an expression of such relief that he understood she had not been sure she would live to see another sunrise. "It is beautiful here," she said softly, looking out at the scrubland that stretched toward the distant mountains. "Harsh but beautiful. It grows on you, Colt agreed, leaning against the porch railing. When I first came here, I thought it was the most God-forsaken place on earth. Now I cannot imagine living anywhere else. How long have you been here? She asked, the first personal question she had posed to him. 10 years come fall, he said. I mustered out of the cavalry in '72 and filed a claim on this land. Built everything you see with my own hands. No family. The question was tentative, as if she feared overstepping. Not anymore, he said simply. My parents died of fever when I was 16. That is when I joined up. Never married, never saw the point when I was moving from fort to fort. He paused, then added, What about you, Miss Dawson? You said you walked from Henderson. Did you have family there? Her expression closed off immediately, and he saw her hands grip the arms of the chair. No, she said flatly. No family. He did not press, recognizing the wall she had thrown up. But that night, after she had gone back to bed and he was lying on his bedroll on the floor of the main room, he heard her crying, soft sobs muffled by the pillow. He stared at the ceiling beams and resisted the urge to go to her, knowing she needed her privacy to grieve whatever loss she had suffered. The pattern continued for another week. Kelsey grew stronger each day, taking over small tasks around the house despite his protests. She insisted on cooking, on mending his worn shirts, on making herself useful in repayment for his kindness. He found himself looking forward to coming in from his work to find her in the kitchen, the smell of bread baking or stew simmering filling the small house with a warmth it had never known. They fell into an easy routine, working side by side during the day, sharing meals, sitting on the porch in the evenings as the heat dissipated, and the stars emerged in impossible numbers across the desert sky. He told her about his time in the cavalry, about learning to survive in hostile territory, about the decision to leave military life behind for the uncertain promise of his own land. She listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed her intelligence and curiosity. But she still said nothing about her own past, and the shuttered look that came over her face whenever he ventured too close to personal territory kept him from pushing. He told himself it did not matter, that she would be moving on soon anyway once she was fully recovered. But the thought of her leaving filled him with an unexpected heaviness. It was on a Saturday evening 3 weeks after she had collapsed at his gate that everything changed. They were sitting on the porch as usual, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of orange and purple, when a rider appeared on the horizon, heading toward the ranch at a steady pace. Colt felt Kelsey go rigid beside him, saw all the color drain from her face as she stared at the approaching figure. Without a word, she bolted from her chair and disappeared into the house. He heard the bedroom door slam and the scrape of furniture being pushed against it. He stood slowly, his hand moving to the gun belt he still wore out of long habit, though he kept the holster unbuckled. The rider resolved into a man as he drew closer, well dressed in town clothes, riding a fine bay horse. He pulled up at the gate and dismounted, tying his horse before walking toward the porch with the confidence of a man used to having doors opened for him. "Good evening," the man called out, his voice smooth and cultured. "I am looking for someone, and I have been told she might have come this way." "A young woman, dark-haired, traveling alone. Have you seen anyone matching that description?" Colt kept his expression neutral, his body language casual despite the tension coiling in his gut. "This is pretty isolated country out here. Do not see many travelers at all. Who is asking?" The man smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "My name is Howard Merrick. I am from Henderson. The young woman I am looking for is my fiancée. She left rather suddenly, and I am concerned for her welfare." "Your fiancée," Colt repeated flatly, "and she left you?" "There was a misunderstanding," Merrick said, his smile tightening. "She is not well, prone to hysteria. I am sure you understand how women can be sometimes, getting ideas in their heads. Her family has asked me to bring her home safely." Every instinct Colt had developed over years of reading men in dangerous situations was screaming that this man was lying. "Like I said, I have not seen anyone. If a woman alone had come through here, I would remember." Merrick's eyes narrowed slightly, and he glanced past Colt toward the house. "You will not mind if I look around then, just to satisfy myself?" "I mind very much," Colt said, his voice dropping to a harder tone. "This is private property and you are not welcome to search it. I have answered your question. Now I suggest you move along before it gets full dark. It is easy to lose your way in the desert at night." For a moment, Merrick's pleasant facade slipped, and Colt saw the anger beneath. "I know she came this way. The storekeeper in Sloan said he saw a woman matching her description a few weeks back, looking like she had been through hell. This is the only ranch in this direction. She is here." "You have been given my answer," Colt said. "Now get off my property before I help you off." Merrick stared at him for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Then he smiled again, cold and calculating. "Very well, but this is not over. She belongs to me, and I will have her back. You should think carefully about the consequences of harboring another man's fiancée." He turned and walked back to his horse, mounting with practiced ease. Before riding off, he called back, "I will be in Sloan. When she comes to her senses, or when you tire of whatever game you are playing, you know where to find me." Colt watched until the rider disappeared into the gathering darkness, then turned and went inside. The bedroom door was still barricaded, but he could hear ragged breathing from the other side. "He is gone," Colt said quietly through the door. "You can come out. You are safe." The silence stretched long enough that he thought she might not respond. Then he heard the scrape of furniture being moved and the door opened slowly. Kelsey stood in the doorway, her face white as bone, her entire body trembling. "He found me," she whispered. "He found me." "He did not find you," Colt corrected gently. "I told him I had not seen anyone. He is gone." "But he will come back," she said, her voice rising with panic. "He will not give up. He never gives up. I have to leave. I have to run again." "Easy," Colt said, reaching out carefully to steady her as she swayed. "Come sit down. Tell me what is going on. Let me help you." She let him guide her to a chair, but she perched on the edge of it, looking ready to bolt at any moment. "You cannot help me. No one can. He has money influence. He owns half of Henderson, and what he does not own, his family does. The law will not touch him." "Tell me," Colt said simply, pulling another chair close and sitting down to face her. "Tell me what happened." The story came out in fits and starts, fragments of sentences punctuated by long pauses as she struggled to get the words out. Her father had died 2 years ago, leaving her alone with debts she had not known about. Howard Merrick had appeared like a savior, offering to pay off the debts in exchange for her hand in marriage. She had agreed, grateful and naive, not understanding what she was agreeing to. He had been charming at first, attentive and generous. But after the engagement was announced, his true nature began to show. He was possessive, controlling, flying into rages when she spoke to other men or went anywhere without his permission. He told her what to wear, what to say, who she could see. And when she tried to end the engagement, to return his ring and walk away from the arrangement, he had laughed. "He told me I belonged to him," she said, her voice hollow. "That he had paid for me fair and square, and I would marry him whether I wanted to or not. When I refused, he locked me in a room in his house, said I would stay there until the wedding day if that was what it took. He had already announced a date, already invited half the territory." "How did you get out?" Colt asked, working to keep the anger from his voice. "There was a fire," she said. A small one in the kitchen. Nothing serious, but it caused enough confusion that the maid who was supposed to be watching me left her post. I climbed out a window and I ran. I stole a dress from a laundry line and just started walking. I knew if I stayed anywhere near Henderson, he would find me. I thought if I could make it to California, maybe to San Francisco, I could disappear. But I ran out of money, out of food. I just kept walking, and then I saw your gate, and I thought maybe God was giving me a place to rest before I died. You are not going to die, Colt said firmly. And you are not going back to him. She laughed, a broken sound. You cannot stop him. He will come back with the law, claim I stole from him or some such nonsense. Or he will just take me by force. He does not care about legality. He cares about winning, about having what he thinks belongs to him. Then we will make sure you do not belong to him, Colt said. In the eyes of the law, in any way that matters. She looked at him with confusion, and he took a breath, hardly believing what he was about to suggest, but knowing it was the right thing, the only thing that made sense. Marry me, he said. If you are my wife, he has no claim on you. A man cannot claim another man's wife as his fiancée. Kelsey stared at him as if he had lost his mind. You cannot be serious. You do not even know me. I know you are brave, Colt said. I know you walked 30 miles across the desert rather than submit to a man you did not want. I know you are kind and hardworking. I know you deserve better than what Howard Merrick wants to give you. He paused, then added more softly. And I know that having you here these past weeks has made this house feel like a home instead of just a place where I sleep. Colt, she breathed, and it was the first time she had used his given name. You do not have to do this. I can leave, keep running. And go where? He challenged. You said yourself you have no money, no resources. How far do you think you will get before he finds you again? Or before something worse happens? He leaned forward, catching her gaze and holding it. I am offering you a choice, Kelsey. You can stay here as my wife, a true partnership, and build a life. Or you can run and spend the rest of your days looking over your shoulder. But if you stay, I swear to you, I will protect you with everything I have. She was quiet for a long time, her eyes searching his face as if trying to find some hidden motive. What do you get out of this? She asked finally. Why would you tie yourself to a woman who brings trouble to your door? Maybe I am tired of being alone, he said honestly. Maybe I like the sound of your voice in the evening and the smell of bread baking and having someone to talk to besides my horses. Maybe that is selfish of me, but there it is. And if I say yes, she asked, her voice barely audible. What kind of marriage would this be? Whatever kind we make it, Colt said. I will not force anything on you, Kelsey. You will have your own space, your own choices. If all we ever are is friends sharing a house and a name, I can live with that. But you will be safe and you will be free. That I can promise you. She closed her eyes and he saw a tear slip down her cheek. When she opened them again, there was determination mixed with the fear. All right, she said. Yes, I will marry you. The next morning, they rode into Sloan together. Kelsey sitting behind Colt on his horse with her arms wrapped around his waist. He could feel her trembling against his back, but she did not ask to turn around. They went straight to the small church at the edge of town, where Pastor Williams lived in modest quarters behind the sanctuary. The pastor was surprised but willing to perform the ceremony with his wife, and the church organist as witnesses. It was a brief affair. Nothing like the elaborate wedding Howard Merrick had no doubt been planning. Kelsey wore the cleanest dress they had been able to salvage from her ruined clothes, and Colt wore his best shirt, the one she had mended so carefully the week before. They exchanged simple vows, and when the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Colt saw relief wash over Kelsey's face like a benediction. They were walking back to where he had tied his horse when Howard Merrick stepped out of the saloon across the street. He stopped dead when he saw them together, his eyes narrowing as he took in the way Kelsey stood close to Colt's side, the protective hand Colt had placed on the small of her back. "Kelsey," Merrick called out, starting toward them. "Finally! I have been waiting for you to come to your senses. Let us go home and forget this unpleasantness." "I am home," Kelsey said, and her voice was stronger than Colt had ever heard it. "And my name is Kelsey Nolan now. I married Colt this morning." Merrick stopped as if he had hit a wall. "You what?" "We were married by Pastor Williams less than an hour ago," Colt confirmed, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "My wife and I are heading back to our ranch now. You have no business with us." "This is insane," Merrick sputtered, his face flushing red. "Kelsey, you cannot do this." "We are engaged. We have an understanding." "The only understanding is that I do not want anything to do with you," Kelsey said. "I am married to Colt and you need to leave me alone." "I paid your father's debts," Merrick said, his voice rising. "That money was not a gift, it was a transaction." "You owe me." "You paid money to a dead man," Colt said flatly. "That does not give you ownership of his daughter. She owes you nothing. Now we are leaving. If you follow us or try to contact my wife again, we will have a problem." He guided Kelsey toward the horse, keeping himself between her and Merrick. They mounted up, Kelsey behind him again, and he turned the horse toward home. As they rode out of town, he could feel Merrick's eyes burning into his back, but the man did not follow. "You think he will give up?" Kelsey asked quietly once they were clear of town. "No," Colt said honestly, "but we will deal with whatever comes, together." Over the following weeks, they settled into married life with surprising ease. Colt had meant what he said about giving Kelsey her own space, and he continued to sleep in the main room while she kept the bedroom. But the walls between them began to erode slowly, built on small moments and shared experiences. She learned that he had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was relaxed, and that he sang softly to the horses when he thought no one could hear. He discovered that she had a sharp mind for numbers and began teaching her the business side of running the ranch, finding her insights valuable when he was trying to decide whether to invest in more cattle or focus on breaking horses to sell. They worked side by side during the day, and he found himself watching her more often than he should, noticing the way the sun caught in her dark hair, the quiet competence with which she approached every task. In the evenings, they sat on the porch and talked about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from philosophy to gossip about the few neighbors they had. A month after the wedding, Colt woke in the middle of the night to the sound of Kelsey screaming. He bolted from his bedroll and burst into the bedroom to find her thrashing in the bed, still asleep but clearly in the grip of a nightmare. He sat on the edge of the bed and caught her hands gently, calling her name until her eyes flew open. She stared at him in confusion for a moment, then burst into tears, the kind of deep, wrenching sobs that spoke of grief too long held inside. Without thinking, Colt pulled her into his arms and she clung to him, crying into his shoulder as he held her and murmured wordless comfort. When the storm finally passed, she pulled back slightly, wiping at her eyes. "I am sorry," she said. "I did not mean to wake you." "Do not apologize," Colt said softly. "Do you want to talk about it?" She shook her head, then hesitated. "It is always the same dream. Howard finding me, dragging me back, locking me away, and no one helps, no one cares." She looked up at him, her eyes red and puffy. "But then I wake up and remember you are here and it gets a little easier." "I am always here," Colt promised. "You are not alone anymore, Kelsey." She leaned her head against his shoulder and they sat like that in the darkness, her breathing gradually evening out. He thought she had fallen back asleep, and he was about to ease her back onto the pillows when she spoke again. "Colt, would you stay? Just for tonight. I do not want to be alone." "Of course," he said immediately. He settled back against the headboard and she curled against his side, her head on his chest. He kept one arm around her, his other hand resting on her hair, and felt her relax into sleep. He stayed awake much longer, staring into the darkness and acknowledging the truth he had been avoiding for weeks. He was falling in love with his wife. The realization should have frightened him, but instead, it settled over him like a comfortable weight. He wanted this, wanted her, wanted the possibility of a real marriage and a real life together. But he had made her a promise, had told her he would never force anything on her. So he held her through the night and said nothing, content to take whatever she was willing to give. The pattern repeated over the following weeks. Kelsey would have nightmares and Colt would come to comfort her, and she would ask him to stay. He always did, holding her until she fell asleep, then carefully extracting himself before morning. But one night, he woke to find her still in his arms, her eyes open and watching him in the early dawn light filtering through the window. "Good morning," he said quietly, suddenly aware of how intimate their position was, her body pressed against his arms wrapped around her. "Good morning," she replied, making no move to pull away. "Colt, can I ask you something? Anything?" "Why did you really marry me?" she asked. "And please do not say it was just to protect me. I need to know the truth." He considered lying, considered telling her what he thought she wanted to hear. But they had built their relationship on honesty, and he would not undermine that now. "Because I wanted to," he said simply. "Because from the moment I saw you lying at my gate, something in me knew you were meant to be here. And every day since then has only convinced me more. I married you to protect you, yes, but also because I could not imagine you leaving." She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing absent patterns on his chest. "I was so afraid," she said finally. "Afraid of men, of marriage, of being trapped again. But you have never made me afraid. You have only made me feel safe." "That is all I want," Colt said. "For you to feel safe and happy." "I do feel safe," she said, "and I am starting to feel happy too. Being here with you, it is the first time in years I have felt like myself, like I can breathe." She lifted her head to look at him directly. "I think I am falling in love with you, Colt Nolan. And that terrifies me." His heart stuttered in his chest. "Why does it terrify you?" "Because I never thought I could feel this way," she said. "I thought Howard had broken something in me, made me unable to trust or care for a man. But then you carried me inside and let me sleep for 3 days, and you took care of me, and you married me without asking for anything in return. You gave me back my life, and now I do not know how to give you my heart without being afraid you will crush it." "I would never hurt you," Colt said fiercely. "Kelsey, I love you. I have loved you for weeks now, maybe from the beginning, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me with your heart." She kissed him then, soft and tentative, a question more than a statement. He answered it carefully, gently, letting her set the pace and the depth. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with tears, but she was smiling. "I want this to be a real marriage," she said. "All of it. Not just sleeping in the same bed, but building a real life together. Can we do that?" "We can do anything you want," Colt promised. "As long as we do it together." The transition from a marriage of convenience to a marriage of love happened gradually, built on small moments and daily choices. Kelsey moved her things into the main room, and they shared the bedroom as husband and wife in truth. Colt found joy in the little intimacies of married life, waking up beside her each morning, sharing coffee on the porch as the sun rose, working together during the day and falling into bed together at night. 3 months after their wedding, they were in Sloan picking up supplies when they ran into Pastor Williams. He greeted them warmly, clearly pleased to see them looking so happy together. "Marriage agrees with you both," he observed with a smile. I must admit, I was concerned when you came to me so suddenly, but I can see now that it was meant to be." "It was," Kelsey agreed, taking Colt's hand. "Best decision I ever made." They were loading their supplies onto the wagon when a stranger approached, a tall man with a badge pinned to his vest. "Excuse me," he said. "I am Marshall Davies from Henderson. I am looking for a Howard Merrick. Have you seen him recently?" Colt and Kelsey exchanged glances. "Not in months," Colt said carefully. "Why? What has he done?" "Fraud, embezzlement, a few other charges," the marshal said. "Turns out he has been running schemes all over the territory, taking money he had no right to. We finally have enough to arrest him, but he has disappeared. I was hoping he might have come this way." "We have not seen him," Kelsey said, and Colt heard the relief in her voice. "But if we do, we will let you know." The marshal thanked them and moved on, and Kelsey turned to Colt with wide eyes. "He is wanted by the law," she said. "All this time he was the criminal, not me." "Justice has a way of catching up," Colt said, squeezing her hand. "He cannot hurt you now, Kelsey. Even if they find him, he will be in prison. You are free." She threw her arms around him right there in the middle of the street, not caring who saw. "I am free," she repeated, and he could hear the wonder in her voice. "I am really free." That night they celebrated with a simple dinner on the porch, watching the stars emerge as darkness fell. "Do you ever regret it?" Kelsey asked. "Taking me in, marrying me, tying your life to mine?" "Not for a single second," Colt said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Kelsey. You turned this house into a home, this land into something worth building on. I only regret that you had to go through so much pain to get here." "I do not regret it," she said thoughtfully. "I hate what Howard did to me, but if it had not happened, I would never have walked across that desert. I would never have collapsed at your gate, and I would never have found you. Sometimes I think about all the things that had to go wrong for me to end up here, and I cannot bring myself to wish any of them away, because they brought me to you." He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "We have a good life here," he said, "and it will only get better." The seasons turned, and with them came changes. They expanded the ranch, buying more land from a neighbor who was moving back east, and invested in a small herd of cattle to supplement the horse breaking that had been Colt's primary income. Kelsey proved to have a gift for managing the business side, keeping careful records and finding buyers willing to pay premium prices for Colt's well-trained horses. One morning in early spring, almost a year after she had collapsed at his gate, Kelsey came out to the corral where Colt was working with a young mare. She leaned against the fence, and he noticed she looked pale. "Are you all right?" he asked, coming over to her immediately. "You look unwell." "I am fine," she said, but there was something in her expression, a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "Colt, I need to tell you something." His heart jumped into his throat. "What is it?" "I am pregnant," she said softly. "I am almost certain. I have been feeling sick in the mornings, and I missed my monthly courses. I think we are going to have a baby." The joy that flooded through him was so intense it nearly knocked him off his feet. He vaulted over the fence and swept her into his arms, spinning her around before setting her down carefully, as if she had suddenly become made of glass. "A baby," he repeated, the words not quite feeling real. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" she asked, searching his face. "We never talked about children. I do not even know if you want them." "Happy," he laughed, a sound of pure delight. "Kelsey, I am happier than I have ever been in my entire life. You are giving me a family. You are giving us a family." She smiled, the nervous tension leaving her shoulders. "I was so afraid you might not want this, that it was too soon or too much." "It is perfect," he assured her. "You are perfect. Everything about this is perfect." They told no one at first, wanting to keep the news to themselves for a little while. But as Kelsey's condition became more apparent, They shared it with their neighbors and the few people they knew in town. Everyone was happy for them, and the women of Sloan rallied around Kelsey, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Colt found himself building a cradle in the evenings, working the wood with careful hands and thinking about the child who would sleep in it. He and Kelsey spent hours talking about names, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, about the future they were building together. In late summer, on a hot August night, Kelsey went into labor. Colt rode for the midwife in town, pushing his horse harder than he ever had, and brought her back to the ranch in record time. He paced outside the bedroom for hours, listening to Kelsey's labored breathing and the midwife's calm instructions, feeling utterly helpless. When the baby's first cry finally pierced the air, he nearly collapsed with relief. The midwife emerged a few minutes later, smiling. "You have a son," she announced. "A healthy boy, and your wife did beautifully. You can go in now." Colt entered the bedroom to find Kelsey propped up against the pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face, and he knew they were tears of joy. "Come meet your son," she said softly. He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair and his eyes were squeezed shut, his little fists waving in the air. He was the most beautiful thing Colt had ever seen. "Can I hold him?" he asked, and Kelsey carefully transferred the baby into his arms. The weight was insignificant, but the responsibility felt enormous. This tiny person was depending on them for everything, and Colt felt a fierce surge of protective love so strong it was almost painful. "What should we name him?" Kelsey asked. They had discussed several options, but now, holding his son, only one felt right. "What about James?" Colt suggested. "It was my father's name. James Nolan." "James," Kelsey repeated, testing the sound. "I like it, James Nolan. Welcome to the world, little one." The baby opened his eyes at the sound of his mother's voice, and Colt could have sworn he saw recognition there, some understanding that he was safe and loved. He handed James back to Kelsey and sat on the edge of the bed, wrapping his arms around both of them. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For this, for him, for everything. You have given me more than I ever dreamed of having." "We gave it to each other," Kelsey corrected gently. "We built this together, Colt. This is our family, our home, our life, and I would not trade it for anything." The years that followed were full and rich. James grew into a sturdy, adventurous boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's quiet determination. When he was 2, Kelsey discovered she was pregnant again, and this time they welcomed a daughter they named Sarah, who had Colt's dark hair and Kelsey's quick smile. The ranch prospered, growing from a modest operation into one of the most successful in the territory. Colt's reputation as a horse trainer spread, and buyers came from as far away as California to purchase his stock. Kelsey managed the accounts with skill, and together they built something substantial, something that would last. But more than the success or the growing family or the expanding ranch, what mattered most to both of them was the love they had found in each other. It had started with an act of desperation and kindness, but it had grown into something deep and enduring, tested by hardship and strengthened by shared joy. On the 5th anniversary of the day Kelsey had collapsed at his gate, Colt surprised her by taking her back to that same spot. The gate had been replaced since then, made stronger to accommodate the growing operation, but the meaning remained. "You remember?" he asked, standing with her in front of the gate as the sun set behind them. "I remember thinking I was going to die," Kelsey said. "I remember looking at this gate and thinking it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen because it meant there might be help, might be hope. And then I remember nothing until I woke up in your bed 3 days later. I remember seeing you lying there and thinking I had never seen anyone so small and fragile, Colt said. And then over the next weeks, watching you get stronger and realizing you were the strongest person I had ever met. You walked 30 miles across the desert, Kelsey. You chose freedom even if it meant death. That took more courage than anything I did in the cavalry. I was running away, she pointed out. You were the brave one, taking in a stranger, protecting me from Howard, giving me a chance at a new life. We were both brave, Colt said. And we were both lucky. Lucky that you chose to walk in this direction, lucky that you made it to this gate, lucky that we found each other. He took her hands in his. I love you, Kelsey Nolan. I loved you when I carried you inside. I loved you when I let you sleep for 3 days. I loved you when I married you, and I love you more with every day that passes. You are my home, my heart, everything that matters. I love you too, Kelsey said, tears sliding down her cheeks. You saved my life in every way a person can be saved, and then you gave me a reason to live it. Thank you for carrying me inside. Thank you for letting me sleep. Thank you for loving me. He kissed her as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Behind them, the ranch house glowed with lamplight, and they could hear the sounds of their children playing inside, their laughter carrying on the evening air. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and as they stepped through the door, Colt thought about all the years that had passed and all the years still to come. The Wild West was changing, becoming more civilized with each passing season, but some things remained constant. Love, family, the land that sustained them, the home they had built together. James ran to meet them, with Sarah toddling behind him, and Kelsey scooped up their daughter while Colt caught their son. They stood there in the main room of the house, the 4 of them together, and Colt felt a profound sense of contentment settle over him. "Papa, tell us the story," James demanded as he did most evenings. "About how you and Mama met." "Again?" Colt asked with mock exasperation, but he was smiling. "You have heard it 100 times, but I like it," James insisted. "Please?" So Colt sat down with James on his lap while Kelsey settled into her chair with Sarah, and he began the story one more time. "It was a hot summer day," he started, "and I was working in the yard when I heard a sound at the gate. When I went to look, I found the bravest, most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She had collapsed from exhaustion, but she had made it to safety. I carried her inside and let her sleep for 3 days until she was strong enough to wake up. And then you fell in love," James filled in, as he always did. "And then we fell in love," Colt confirmed, meeting Kelsey's eyes across the room. She smiled at him, that same smile that had been lighting up his days for 5 years now, and he knew with absolute certainty that he would never tire of it. "And we lived happily ever after," Sarah added, her words still slightly garbled by her toddler pronunciation. "That's right, sweetheart," Kelsey said, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "We lived happily ever after, and they did." Through the years that followed, through the challenges that came with raising a family and running a ranch, through the changes that transformed the Wild West into something tamer and more settled, Colt and Kelsey Nolan built a life together that was everything they had dreamed of and more. When James grew old enough to help with the ranch work, Colt taught him everything he knew about horses and cattle, about the land and how to care for it, about the value of hard work and integrity. Sarah proved to have her mother's head for numbers, and by the time she was 10, she was helping Kelsey with the account books and had already announced her intention to go to university someday, a dream that both her parents encouraged. 2 more children joined the family over the years, another son named Thomas and a daughter named Elizabeth. The ranch house was expanded to accommodate the growing family, but the core of it remained the same: the bedroom where Kelsey had recovered, the main room where they gathered in the evenings, the porch where Colt and Kelsey still sat together and watched the stars. They grew old together, their hair turning gray, their faces gaining lines that spoke of laughter and hard work and years lived fully. But the love between them never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by time and experience and the life they had built together. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party, inviting half the territory to celebrate. Colt and Kelsey stood together on their porch, surrounded by friends and family, and looked out at the ranch that had become one of the most successful in Nevada. "Did you ever imagine this?" Kelsey asked quietly, leaning against Colt's side. "When you carried me through that door 25 years ago, did you imagine we would end up here?" "I did not imagine anything beyond getting you well," Colt admitted. "But I hoped. From that first moment I hoped." He turned to face her, taking her hands in his. "And every hope has been exceeded. You gave me everything, Kelsey. A family, a home, a purpose. You gave me love when I did not even know I was lonely. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "You saved me," Kelsey said simply. "In every way a person can be saved. And then you loved me, which was an even greater gift. I walked across that desert thinking I was going to die, and instead I found life. I found you. I found home." Their children gathered around them, along with the grandchildren who had started arriving in recent years, and someone called for a toast. Glasses were raised, and voices joined together in celebration of a marriage that had started with an act of desperation and kindness, and had grown into something beautiful and enduring. As the party continued into the night, Colt and Kelsey slipped away for a moment of quiet. They walked to the gate where it had all begun, standing in the same spot where she had collapsed all those years ago. The Nevada sky stretched above them, impossibly vast and filled with stars, the same sky that had witnessed their beginning and would witness their ending, however many years hence that might be. "I would do it all again," Kelsey said softly. "Every hard mile across that desert, every moment of fear and pain, I would do it all again to end up here with you. I would wait at this gate every day for the rest of my life if that is what it took," Colt replied. "You are worth any wait, any struggle, any sacrifice." They stood together in the darkness, two people who had found each other against all odds and had built something lasting from that chance encounter. The ranch thrived around them. Their children were healthy and happy. Their grandchildren were starting to fill the house with the same energy their own children once had. It was everything they had worked for, everything they had dreamed of, everything they had built together. Years continued to pass, bringing new joys and inevitable sorrows. They buried old friends and welcomed new family members. They weathered droughts and celebrated good years. They saw the wild west of their youth transform into something more settled and civilized, watched as the territory of Nevada became a state, and the rough edges of frontier life were gradually smoothed away. But through it all, the core of their life together remained constant. The love that had begun when Colt carried an exhausted stranger into his house and let her sleep for 3 days had grown into something that sustained them through everything life brought their way. They had taken a chance on each other, and that chance had paid off in ways neither of them could have predicted. When Colt was 72 and Kelsey was 68, they sat on their porch on a warm spring evening, watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard. The ranch was in capable hands now, run by James and his family, though Colt and Kelsey still lived in the house where they had started their life together. "You ever think about what your life would have been like if you had not walked across that desert?" Colt asked, taking Kelsey's hand in his as he had done countless times over their nearly 50 years of marriage. "Never," Kelsey said firmly. "This is my life. This is the only life I want to think about. The life we built together, the family we raised, the love we shared. Everything else is just shadow and might have been. This is real. This is home." "This is home," Colt agreed, squeezing her hand gently. "And you are the heart of it, Kelsey, always have been from that very first day." They sat together as the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and watched their family, the legacy of a love that had started with exhaustion and desperation, and had grown into something that would outlast both of them. Their children would remember, and their children's children, the story of how it all began. How a woman walked 30 miles across the unforgiving desert and collapsed at a cowboy's gate. How he carried her inside and let her sleep for 3 days. How they fell in love and built a life that was rich and full and beautiful. When Colt died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Kelsey mourned him deeply, but without despair. She knew she had been blessed beyond measure to have so many years with him, to have built such a life together. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and when her time came, she went peacefully, content in the knowledge that she had lived well and loved deeply. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names and the years of their lives. But their real memorial was the family that continued to thrive, the ranch that prospered through generations, and the story that was passed down through the years. The story of how love could bloom in the harshest environment, how kindness could change the course of 2 lives, how a moment of desperation could lead to a lifetime of happiness. The story of a woman who collapsed at a gate from exhaustion, and the cowboy who carried her inside and let her sleep 3 days, and how that simple act of compassion grew into a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. The ranch still stood 100 years later, still run by descendants of Colt and Kelsey Nolan, still a testament to what 2 people could build together when they took a chance on each other. The gate where it all began was long gone, replaced multiple times over the decades, but the spot was marked with a plaque that told the story for anyone who cared to read it. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the desert sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, people claimed they could see 2 figures standing at that spot, holding hands and watching the sunset, still together, even in the timeless space beyond life. Whether it was truth or fancy hardly mattered. What mattered was the love that had started there, the life that had grown from it, and the legacy that continued through the generations. It was a love story for the ages, born from hardship and struggle, nurtured by kindness and patience, and sustained by devotion and partnership. It was the story of the Wild West at its best, showing not the violence and lawlessness that so often dominated the tales from that era, but the quiet heroism of ordinary people building lives together in an extraordinary landscape. Colt Nolan had been a simple cowboy with a modest ranch and a solitary life. Kelsey Dawson had been a desperate woman fleeing from a nightmare with nothing but the clothes on her back and the will to survive. Together, they had become something more than either could have been alone. They had become a family, a legacy, a love story that would be remembered and retold for generations, and it had all started with a simple act of compassion. A woman collapsed at a gate from exhaustion. A cowboy carried her inside and let her sleep 3 days. And from that beginning came everything else. Love, marriage, children, grandchildren, a life well lived and a story worth telling. The Wild West had been full of stories of outlaws and lawmen, of gunfights and gold rushes, of wagon trains and cattle drives. But the best stories, the ones that really mattered, were the ones about people like Colt and Kelsey. People who chose kindness over cruelty, love over fear, hope over despair. People who built lives and families and communities in a harsh and unforgiving land. People who proved that even in the wildest places, humanity could flourish, love could bloom, and happy endings were possible for those brave enough to reach for them. And so the story ended where it began, at a gate in the Nevada desert, with two people whose lives had intersected at exactly the right moment to create something beautiful and lasting. They had been strangers once, brought together by chance and desperation. But they had become partners, lovers, friends, and finally, a legend. The legend of a love that had survived everything life could throw at it and emerged stronger for the trials. It was a story the Wild West needed, a reminder that amid all the violence and struggle, there was also tenderness, compassion, and enduring love. It was a story that would be told and retold, each generation finding new meaning in the simple tale of a cowboy and the woman who collapsed at his gate, and how they built a life together that was worth living and a love worth celebrating. That was the true legacy of Colt and Kelsey Nolan. Not the ranch, though it prospered. Not the children, though they were many and accomplished. But the love itself, the proof that even in the hardest times and the harshest places, two people could find each other and build something beautiful together. That was the story that mattered, the story that would last, the story that made everything else worthwhile.